speaker for the morning is Ms. Jodee Bootle, and Jodee joins us having a long, illustrious career across many different professions, but most recently she's 13 years has been working in the ED and across a number of different other roles, but her topic today is about the Northern Hospital's ambulance offload performance improvement, nursing-led, nursing-driven and nursing success. So she's currently working as the nursing unit manager at the Northern Hospital in the emergency department. She has a passion for about leading teams and implementing innovative processes for a sustainable future. So thank you, and please warmly welcome Jodee.
Thanks very much. So my name is Jodee Bootle. I'm the nurse unit manager of the emergency department. I moved over there in July last year after spending a long time at the Royal Melbourne, doing various roles in access and ED, and also I managed a acute medical unit for 5 years, so sort of learnt my groundings there. Who are the Northern Hospital? We're in the northern suburbs, obviously, of Melbourne, where we get a lot of patients from the rural environment, but also metro as well. So we're sort of on that brink there. We get 92,000 presentations per year, so that was our figures for last financial year. And 25,000 of them patients present via an ambulance. We have about a 10% growth in the community, so and it's a very multicultural community, and people tend to either drive themselves to hospital or they will get we've got a lower socioeconomic community, so they'll get an ambulance as well. We're a 57-bed emergency department with 5 resource bays. However, about 18 of them cubicles close down at 2 o'clock in the morning, so our paediatric pod actually closes down at 2 and doesn't open back up to 9:30 in the morning. Our AV offload, our ambulance offload cubicles close down as well at 2 o'clock, as well as some fast track and assessment waiting rooms. We've also got a 23-bedded short stay unit. So as you can imagine, with such a high presentation of patients to the emergency department, you'd expect we'd have a pretty big hospital. Well, we actually don't. We've only got 290 beds at the Northern Hospital. We have another campus called Broadmeadows, which has 46 beds. We have a large maternity population. It's an all-new housing estate, so you know, they're big producers of kids. Surgical and medical. We've got a 9-bedded ICU currently. However, the good news is that the government's just gave us a huge funding boost, and by 2021 we're actually going to expand the hospital by another 196 beds, plus a larger ICU. So when we talk about capacity and presentation, so this slide's a pretty good slide, I think, which sort of explains where we are. So we're the red bar in sense of our bed capacity compared to our presentations to the emergency department, compared to some of the other major hospitals in Melbourne. So as you can see, our presentations are huge, but our bed capacity is really small. 27% of our patients who present to ED get admitted into a 336-bedded organisation. About 69% of them present via an ambulance. And about 30 patients a day go to theatre, so we really needed to expand the hospital. So, but today I'm here to talk about the ambulance offload project. The KPI for the Department of Health in Victoria states that we have to actually transfer or offload our ambulances in less than 40 minutes, and we have to do that in greater than 90% of our patients. So we get about 25,000 ambulances in for the last financial year on a daily basis now. You know, we're hitting 69, but it has a huge effect on our community because by reducing our offload times, we're actually able to improve patients' access to acute health, but also improves the responses for the ambulances to go back out to our community, because a lot of the staff there, they actually live in the area because the hospital is sort of out in the suburbs a bit. So they've actually got a vested interest into providing really good service because they don't know whether this ambulance is actually going to go to their loved one or their family or their friends next. So we have an obligation, obviously, to get the patients off. So we started a bit of an improvement process. We did a bit of tracking. Obviously, I'm sure it's like everyone. We get ambulances in a clumping. We could get 12 ambulances arriving in 40 minutes, or whatever the case is. We've got high activity. About 2/3 of our patients walk through the front door. But we also had some significant delays to actually getting triaged. We didn't really have cubicle space to offload, and there was really no transparency for the nursing performance from triage nurses. So our setup is we have 2 triage nurses that triage at the waiting room 24/7, and then at 9:30 we get an ambulance triage nurse starting, and so there's 2 shifts, and they finish at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we've got 3 triage nurses over most of the day. So we commenced the redesign. We actually weren't hitting our targets. So this is the last couple of years of data. This was a bit of a political hotspot in Victoria because, the government and the minister was putting a lot of pressure on all the organisations to actually start hitting this target. So we brought it back to basics, and we went, there's things that are out of our control, so let's not even concentrate that. The clumping, we can't control that. The high activity, well, they're going to keep coming anyway. And access block, well, let's not even go there. But let's concentrate on things that are actually within our control, and that is, how well do we triage? Where are we going to put our patients in our own ED? And certainly, where's the transparency for the nursing performance? So we went from the at destination, so that is when the ambulance pulls into the ambulance bay. We give them 5 minutes, for example. That's a fair and reasonable amount of period for them to pull the trolley out of the back of the ambulance and walk inside. And then how well do we actually triage them patients? So we certainly did some tracking there. So we looked at the ambulance triage nurse, and what would happen is we took a fair bit of time to actually just watch them triage. So 5 ambulances could come in at once. Some triage nurses would triage one, then they'd go and look for that physical cubicle to see if it was vacant, and then come back and then triage the second one because they sort of wanted to triage them all before they started distributing them. They would never escalate, so they wouldn't escalate to somebody to say, hey, I've got a lot of ambulances coming in. We have an ambulance arrivals board, which is a really big help. So when, if they saw 3 or 4 coming in or whatever the case is, there was sort of no communication with the ANUM to say, hey, we've got a lot coming in. We have 2 ANUMs per shift as well, so it's a fairly big footprint space. They didn't really know where they were tracking in the sense of when the ambulance arrives to our destination to actually how quick are they actually triaging. So there was really no performance data tracked on the triage nurses. And I know performance data for nurses is a little bit confronting. However, it gives us a really good idea about quality and of triaging. We created a real-time ambulance offload dashboard, which the triage nurse will have it open next to them. The ANUM will actually have it open, and that will tell us when the patient gets offloaded in the cubicle whether they're actually putting their times in. There's no role descriptions. So how do you know what you're doing, when you're doing, and how you're escalating it if you don't have a role description? So we actually wrote up a role description which had a escalation process. It had measures of success and how they should be triaging. So we said for the ambulances, we'd expect the triages to be completed within 10 minutes. At the front desk, E-Tech tells us for the waiting room, it should be done within 3 minutes. And we also, the education team has been really proactive at doing self-review triage packages. So that is, we pull off 12 triages for a triage nurse, 2 of each category, 2 paediatrics. The triage nurse will then actually do a self-review package, and then the education team will sit down and go through with them. So we've been able to actually capture some of them probably poor performers, or them nurses that actually hadn't touched base with the education team for such a long time. And then we actually do now ongoing audits and feedback. So the ANUMs actually audit 2 files per ANUM per shift and provide some real-time feedback. So we started that probably about 4 months ago, and we've audited over 800 files. So we actually provide them with that real-time feedback as well. So this is the other thing that I do is I send out de-identified data to all the triage nurses. So I get all the individual data, I put it into a graph, and I send them a bit of an email saying, hi, I'd just like to, you might find it interesting how your data is compared to your colleagues. I hope you find this useful. And then I'll put you are staff member BM. So this is initially when we started it. And as you can see, the data was all over the place. Some nurses were triaging, and this is average, some nurses were triaging in 19 minutes. So when you think about it, we've got to offload in less than 40 minutes. So if you're spending 19 minutes just purely in the triage, and say, for example, you spend another 8 minutes probably doing the bedside handover, it doesn't give you much time. And some were actually triaging really well. So it was all over the place. The other thing we did was back in July, and I'll show you a bit of a tracking of implementations, is I was able to secure some fixed term funding for an ambulance offload nurse. Now this complements, we actually put in specific offload cubicles, which is my next slide. And the same thing as well, I worked with the education team to do up some role descriptions, once again with measures of success. Like I said, it was initial fixed term funding. We did a lot of pre-implementation education about this because this was a completely new role for the department, and so it was important that they actually sort of get their head around about how to operate and the escalation process. So it's designed for our first disposition for every ambulance person should be into their right area. So that is, we triage them into the waiting room or into a cubicle. However, if there's nothing available, we would offload them into one of these 3 cubicles. And then the really good bang for our buck about the ambulance offload nurse is if we don't have a need to use the cubicles, we're actually using them in the waiting room because we have 200 patients coming to the waiting room. So we get really good bang for our buck there in the sense of nursing redeployment. So the offload cubicles. We had our inside waiting room. So what we did is we actually changed our front of house model, ironically to the separate to this, and so we converted them to some ambulance offload cubicles. Like I said, they've got a dedicated nurse. The fixed term funding now is ongoing funding, so it's a funded position. And the offload cubicles actually open at 9:30 now and close at 2 o'clock. It's right next to the ambulance right-up room and in front of one of the ANUMS desks. So, like I said previously, the first disposition is that we would always put an ambulance into the waiting room of the cubicle. This is just in case those areas are full. And you're probably thinking, oh, they're bumping off the waiting room patients. We actually don't. They are still prioritised in the sense of the needs, but the difference is with these cubicles, we don't put waiting room patients in these cubicles. So we really protect these cubicles well. So we put in some principles for our ambulance offloading, and these are, the triage of a patient within 10 minutes. They've got to utilise the ambulance arrivals board, and those times are high clumping. What we'll do is, at times, we may have three nurses triaging the ambulances, so we can get through them all at once. So they'll actually escalate and say, hey, I need some help. And so we'll utilise, we've put a lot of new computers in, so we'll utilise and do multi-mass triaging as well. The escalation process as real-time data has really helped nurses. So implementation, building capability and sustainability measures. These are really, I think, really good key things to mention. It was important to do lots of pre-launch stuff, lots of education, lots of promotion and staff forums. I mean, it wasn't just myself doing the staff forums to nurses. It was actually the medical staff did that as well. What was our outcome? I just got the 2 minutes heads up. So our outcome. This was actually our outcome. And this is where we tracked. So as you can see, the green line is actually our target. And so by the end of December, we're actually hitting our target. And this is when all of our improvements sort of got implemented. And we've actually, fortunately been able to sustain our target for the year. And this is just an interesting graph to show the Department of Health, Better Care Victoria actually puts out graphs compared to other major metropolitan hospitals, and we're the bold red there, so you can see that we've been fairly stable even over the winter periods. Mind you, the last couple of months has been particularly difficult. And what's it mean for our hospital and what's it mean for our staff? That we've actually been able to save 5.6 minutes in average for offload time. That actually equates to about another 7 hours of an ambulance resource back in the community. And for our staff and our community, that's really important, and it's really good for our ambulance service. The ironic thing is that we've actually had a 15% increase in ambulances arrive. Damn it. That's it. Any questions? I did impress my start.
I think you'd all agree that is a fantastic achievement, Jodee, and one to be very much applauded. Let's throw it out to the audience. Any questions from any of our participants? Yes.
Hello, we have a similar sort of thing at Fiona Stanley in WA. We've got 4 A-Bay things, but we seem to get them onto our A-Bays and then they get stuck there for hours.
Yeah.
Like, we're the same. Do you guys have any solutions of getting them into the department quicker? Or do they clog up just as quick and then they stay in the A-Bay for a long period?
Good question. We found it's been quite difficult and challenging over winter. We've got significant access block, obviously, and so we have had to open these, keep them open overnight. So it has been challenging, particularly over the last few months. When our access is pretty good, like I said, sometimes we don't need to use them. But when we're actually really got access block, they're actually a good space to put the patients in. At times, the triage nurses are getting smarter about who they put in them cubicles. They may put them patients that they think may get a short stay. And so they may put them in there because then short stay will actually identify that these could be their potential patients. The other space that the triage nurses are getting better at is putting patients that they think could potentially get a short stay in a fast track, because we want to fast track them to a short stay. So that's good.
Jodee, were there any cases where inappropriately offloaded? Your unintended consequences. You're like, really, that patient ended up having a NOF. We probably shouldn't have offloaded them into the waiting room, or you know what I mean? Yeah.
So the qualitative stuff was really important to us. We found that we've actually been able to maintain our safety. We haven't really had any major significant issues with offloading our ambulances or our waiting room patients waiting too long. At times, especially over the winter, we'd have 47 patients waiting for an inpatient bed, which is enormous numbers for us. The nurses have worked really particularly hard over the winter to sort of maintain the quality and certainly escalate. They're quite vocal about escalating. This patient definitely needs to come inside.
Question from the North Shore.
Yes.
We've been under pressure, as all hospitals, to do what you've done, and we've absolutely refused. And the reason we refuse is it doesn't put pressure back onto the hospital. I did a presentation earlier. If you keep band-aiding the problem of the hospital, you end up keeping them overnight. As you've turned out, you keep them longer. So we stand very firm and don't do it. So the pressure's back on the hospital, and the numbers are also under pressure to keep offloading the ambulances into the available beds. We don't. If there's a chest pain in the waiting room, it precedes. So we've got this whole red line rule to say we won't prioritise the ambulances because it's a whole organisation problem, and we're not band-aiding, so we won't be doing what you're doing. Sorry.
Well, and like I said previously, we're actually not prioritising the ambulances over the waiting room patients. That's really important, but we're also concentrated on just getting our backyard really clean. And so we figured that if we can hit our targets within the emergency department, that will naturally put pressure on the organisation to create capacity for us. And they're doing a lot of work. However, they've still got a long way to go to improve their early discharges and all these other things to assist us. But we can't really throw stones unless we've actually got our business under control.
Hi, I'm Annie from Perth as well. I'm at Royal Perth. You say you've done this wonderful process and now you've got a 15% increase in ambulances. Is that because you're doing an awesome job?
Yeah, probably, I would say. but that's okay, because we certainly wanted a culture of, you know what, you guys, you know, we'll accept you, that's fine, happy for you to come to the organisation, because we actually want to provide that good service. And so we're not annoyed at them, you know, it's still come on in, you know. Obviously, if we're really busy, the ambulance service is still really busy as well, and, you know, still got backlog calls that they have to attend.
Have you found too that, Jodee, as a result of that communication and relationships between the ambulance service staff members and the emergency department has improved, or is that
yeah, absolutely.
anecdotal?
So the relationship's certainly got a lot better. They're feeding back to us, you know, really positive things, which is great for staff. We're very open with our data. We do put up comparative graphs and everything to the staff to say, you know, good job, well done. And so they're getting that feedback as well. But we have regular meetings with the ambulance service, so certainly the relationships are really good.
With the offload area, do you have any sort of facilities for those patients? Like, do you have oxygen behind that area? Do you have monitoring? So are you able to monitor a chest pain patient who's been offloaded, and can the nurse actually do treatment for the patient in that area? Yeah,
definitely. So we can do treatment. We have some portable monitors, so we can actually monitor. However, if they're high suspicion of an event, we'll either get the heads up that this patient's coming in anyway, and we will pretty good at moving the chest pieces around on the board, and that's what we need to do. But they've got all their own stuff in there set up like a cubicle anyway. The good thing about these spaces is they've actually got some roll down shutters, so if we need to manage a behavioural disturbed person in there or whatever the case is, we can actually pull the shutters down on the oxygen and suction to make it a safer room as well. Not that we don't actually put behavioural disturbed people in there much. Yep. Hi.
What's your escalation processes once the 30 minutes is up for those?
Yep. Yep.
If you've got leadership they've blocked, what happens?
So they will escalate at 20 minutes to the ANUM to say, hey, I'm at 20 minutes. If there's nowhere to go, obviously there's not much we can do about that. More times than not, we'll be able to get them out before the 30 minutes, but obviously over the last few months it's been a little bit more challenging because they know that they can actually turn these patients over a bit quicker, especially if they put the right patient in there, like the short stay patients, because short stay is really good at coming out and actually pulling patients out and identifying and stuff like that, because you know, obviously our emergency physicians work in short stay as well, so we try to put the right patients in there. We won't put patients in there that are high suspicion. You know, if they need a resuscitate, they need a resuscitate. You know, we'd never put a resuscitation patient in this space.
And I guess too, Jodee, then I take it this didn't apply to those who are bat phoned in. You know, those who get bat phoned just go directly to the appropriate area.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Well, if there's no, one more question. Great.
Hi.
Maybe repeat the question.
You said a 10-minute time frame for triage. I'm just wondering how you come up with the 10 minutes with the guidelines for 45.
Yep. So the education team, who are sitting behind you, gave us the advice of 10 minutes, e-tech, and we use e-tech a lot. So 10 minutes was decided on. Well, 5 minutes is a fair and reasonable time for the crews to get the patients out of the back of the truck. And then we thought, well, another 5 minutes is a reasonable amount of time for the nurse to actually triage. So our clock actually starts ticking from our destination.
How do you get that data? Like, do you get it from Ambulance Victoria? Is that, okay.
Yeah.
So they can keep going.
It's actually a GPS. There's a couple of ways, and I think they're currently fixing up. It can be the ambulance arrival board is activated by a GPS tracker, but what happens is we've got a set of lights in front of our hospital. If they stop at the lights, it actually starts saying they're at our destination. So we've raised it a couple of times because they're jipping us out of time. But it's normally they'll push a button when they're at triage. So they've just actually, the ambulance service has actually improved the ambulance arrivals board, where they now need to put their offload times in, which is great because then it shows how long they're actually spending at hospital post offloading, and they're trying to put more pressure on their crews to not linger around. So they've got a bit more transparency about their own data, which is really good.
Well, it's fairly clear, Jodee, why you were Royal Melbourne Nurse of the Year. So I'd like everyone to join hands and say thank you very much for that great presentation.